It's July 9th, and that means it's the anniversary of the sudden death from cholera back in 1850 of Zachary Taylor. Yes, I'm talking about Zachary. I never heard of him, Taylor. He was, in fact, the 12th President of the United States. He was the second Whig elected to the presidency, and he was the second Whig to die early in his first term, leaving virtually no impact on American politics, except perhaps a negative one. Because the failure of the Whig Party to develop into a full and realistic alternative to the Democrats in the 2 decades leading up to the American Civil War are a major reason the Civil War happened. Now, for all its horrors, I'm not sorry the American Civil War happened in the sense that it brought an end to slavery. But the American Civil War did not bring an end to bigotry and segregation, and there might have been other ways to end slavery less violently and achieve civil rights sooner for blacks. I'm not saying there necessarily was, and if there was, I'm not saying Zachary Taylor was necessarily the man for the job. The problem the Whigs had as an upstart party was the need to appeal to non-traditional supporters, since they didn't have any traditional supporters. That's why they went with war hero William Henry Harrison in 1840. Unfortunately, he gave the longest inaugural speech in history on a blustery March day bareheaded. He was elderly, he caught pneumonia, and died just a month into his presidency. Zachary Taylor came along. He too was a war hero. He too had cross-party appeal. He didn't apparently have any political convictions. But one interesting thing about Taylor, though he was a Southerner and a slave owner, he was hostile to the expansion of slavery, and he was very pointedly hostile to secessionists. Now, I say the Whigs never developed into a full alternative to the Democrats. At a congressional level, they were pretty convincing rivals. The Democrats tended to be ahead in Congress, but not by much, and the Whigs did sometimes win control of the House and the Senate. But they never got a president who might have led a movement to keep slavery contained, to shut it into the South, and to put it on a path to natural extinction, possibly with compensated emancipation. What happened instead is that the Democratic Party became more and more beholden to its fire-eating Southern enthusiast for slavery base, more and more intransigent. That pushed more and more Northerners into the more intransigent wing of the Republican camp, and ultimately, despite Lincoln's best efforts, by the way, to avoid the Civil War, to the election of Lincoln and a decision by the South that it was now or never for the institution of slavery. Now, as I said, I'm glad it was never. I'm sorry for all the bloodshed, but it was not too high a price to pay, as Lincoln himself said in his second inaugural, for the sin of slavery. What really bothers me is that the Civil War and Reconstruction sowed such bitterness in the South that, in somehow to get back at the Yankees, they maintained an incredible level of hostility to blacks for at least a century afterward. And again, I'm not suggesting that Zachary Taylor was a giant manqué, but I am saying that if the Whigs had managed to have a couple of successful administrations, maybe they'd have found a whole system of policy, including policies on slavery, that could have set it on the path to peaceful extinction. It's a long shot, but it's one that would have been worth taking in this case, and it's part of an accident of history that both Whig presidents died so early. Harrison was succeeded by John Tyler, who was such a diehard Democrat, he was a ticket balancer, that he ended his life as a member of the Confederate Congress. Zachary Taylor was succeeded by Millen Fillmore, who was such a non-entity that you're at least as likely to have heard of Taylor as of Fillmore. But the failure of the Whigs due to this historical accident of 2 presidents dying in office early is a major what if. What if they'd managed to produce a strong administration? What if they'd found another way? Unfortunately, because of Zachary Taylor's bout of cholera, there's no way we'll ever know.